Taking time to be ready to explain the hope we have is more than just wanting to have the words to say. It is a practice of gratitude in reflecting on our faith journeys and how far we've come, just like we did yesterday and earlier today. It is learning the words to our own good news. It is a valuable spiritual exercise that can draw us closer to God. And so in thinking about evangelism and about sharing the good news as a spiritual practice, I want to offer up a tool to help us deepen our relationship with God from a United Church foundation. Now, I am just one person in the United Church of Canada. Like, as Takui pointed out, a pretty, not to toot my own horn, but this tool comes from my experience, my life, my perspective, my lens. I grew up in evangelical conservative Christian communities. I was part of Baptist church, and then I Brethren churches and Vineyard churches, and I dabbled in Anglicanism. I started discernment in the Anglican church, and I got a yes to discernment and a no to Anglicanism. And then I was lured by that sexy United Church who offered cool theology, and oh boy, I got hooked. So that's to say that this tool comes from my perspective. I hope that it's helpful, but I don't want you to think that I'm prescribing it to you. It's a conversation starter. I want to share with you 4 inner postures or attitudes that we can cultivate as we hope to share the good news that was once first shared with us, a blending of our deep spirituality and bold discipleship. But first, let's talk about what we're worried about. Because when I told people I was going to do this presentation, I got a lot of, gut reactions. And if you were here for the Mitchell Anderson presentation, you know about, gut reactions. When we hear people talk about evangelism or testimony or witness, we tend to picture something like this. Perhaps it is a street preacher loudly proclaiming the end times, or the dreaded knock on the door. The one that makes you pretend that no one is home, or maybe you think of a friend or a coworker who keeps awkwardly steering the conversation forcefully to the question of whether you've been saved or not. We could come up with all sorts of scenarios, but I don't want to linger there too long. That's to say, what I'm suggesting is not something that's obnoxious or insensitive or predatory. Instead, we want to cultivate an attitude that keeps these things in mind. First and foremost, evangelism requires consent. Consent is when someone gives you permission to enter their bubble, which can be a physical bubble, like with a hug, or an emotional bubble, like having a vulnerable conversation with someone. We always wait for the curious question, for consent before sharing. And then we respond to what we're being asked. We're not great at this. In other words, and I'm paraphrasing the Apostle Paul here, we let the gospel do its own self-promotion. We don't need to force Jesus on anyone. We also need to earn the right to share with others by being non-judgmental and compassionate. We demonstrate our transformation through how we live, by the ways that we love others, and we seek justice. It is through living out our confession of faith that we earn the trust to share it with our words. And when we think back to Evan's presentation earlier, that question of distrust of the church, How do we earn back that trust? I presented this at Naganhaga last week, and someone disagreed about this one, but I kept it in. The third one is that evangelism does, in fact, require words. They do need to be your own words. You need to find your own good news to share and to remember that it's not an argument. We don't need to convince anyone of anything. We are merely witnesses to transformation. And I think I can say with confidence in this room that we believe that when folks come and see that God is at work, that something wonderful happens. So the first attitude or inner posture we want to cultivate is to be open. My heart is open to encountering Christ in others, both familiar and strangers. Inspired by the gospel teachings of Christ appearing as a stranger, welcoming strangers, and identifying with strangers, this first attitude sets the stage not just for evangelism, but for relationship with others. Because for most of us, there is no impactful sharing of the good news outside of relationship. Some of us might be called to speak up as preachers, prophets, activists, leaders, or teachers, but most of the time, the way we pass our faith on to those around us is through loving relationship. This brings me to the second attitude. When we are open, it allows us to cultivate curiosity. And to be curious means we don't have room for judgment. To be curious about others invites us to hear their stories and to ask questions and to begin to care deeply about their lives and their faith journeys. I care about those around me and listen to them deeply. I know you know when someone's not listening to you deeply. Now, this attitude is a response to the first two. Open to God's Spirit at work around us and curious about those we encountered, we are moved to respond first with prayer. A prayerful attitude cannot be an attitude of ego, of wanting to say the right thing or come across in the best light. A prayerful attitude centers the other person and desires good things for them. I invite God to lead my thoughts and actions so that I may love others well. And it can be the simplest prayer. God, how can I love this person best? It can be a heartfelt prayer that acknowledges that we have so little power in this world. God, this person shared such a painful story with me. Please be with them. Help them to know they are loved. And sometimes, this is where we stay. Sometimes this is where our evangelism journey with someone ends. We are open to them, we love them deeply, and we ask God to be present in their lives, and that is all. Sometimes that is the faithful response. And other times, we are given a gift. Other times we have earned someone's trust and respect, and they make the vulnerable choice to ask us to share our stories, which in turn is also a vulnerable act. And my prayer is that you will be bold. That when invited, you will find your words to share a small part of your own faith journey, to proclaim God's liberating message through your one human experience. When invited, I risk sharing my story of transformation with others. And friends, honestly, it helps to practice. To practice that act of gratitude, that act of naming God at work in our lives, so that when the call to boldness comes, we are ready. I want to share a story with you about an ordinary moment of evangelism. It's not particularly spectacular, but it's kind of fun. The St. John, New Brunswick airport has had a broken water bottle refill station for months. Drives me nuts. So I was sitting there waiting to fly to somewhere, because that's kind of what I do nowadays, and I was sitting by the vending machine. And this parent has a child, and the child says, "Mom, I'm so thirsty, can I have something to drink?" Well, the water bottle refill station is broken. Do not drink out of the faucet in the bathroom. But here's the vending machine, and the parent says to the child, "I'm sorry, sweetie. I just have a card. It doesn't take cards. I can't get you a bottle of water." I'm sitting right there. I've got like $5 in my pocket, so I say, "Here, take the $5, get your kid a bottle of water." No big deal. She says, "Thank you." She takes the money. He gives me back the coins. But I could tell she was sort of uncomfortable with the generosity. She kept saying, thank you so much. I'll buy you something to eat on the plane." I'm like, that is not a fair exchange. And she kept pressing, and I could just feel that, sometimes when there's like an imbalance and someone feels like they owe you. And I say, "Look, Jesus told us to give thirsty people something to drink. Don't worry about it." And she sits down across from me, and she says, "Oh, I'm a teacher at the Catholic school board in Calgary." And we had a 30-minute conversation. One of those conversations you only have in airports or bus stations or on buses. Okay, so they happen in liminal spaces. And I never saw her again. It's not groundbreaking. It's just sharing our stories and being open and not being ashamed of God's story at work in our lives. Sometimes it is offering to pray for someone. Sometimes it's fielding. My Uber driver headed back to the hotel yesterday, found out where I was, and he's like, "I have questions about biblical translation." Yeah. We had a really good conversation about like where the text comes from, source languaging. I was nerding out. He had a great time. He got a really good review. He's like, "I hope you don't mind." I'm like, this is what I like dream of talking about all day. So it doesn't need to be, those TV movie moments with the swelling music. It's you being yourself, allowing God's transforming work to shine through you, and being open and, oh man, see, y'all are laughing at my jokes, and I'm like, I want to tell more jokes. Yeah, the funny thing about doing the work that I do is 90% of it is just repeating common sense things that I think we all know in our hearts, but doing it with a fancy presentation in a calm, soothing voice. Don't tell them that they shouldn't pay the growth department, because you're still getting your money's worth. But if you'd like to continue the conversation about what evangelism could look like in your community of faith, what strengthening invitation could look like, if you're looking for resources, or perhaps you have had a rough month, year, decade in ministry and you need a cheerleader, your growth animator is here to animate you. So thank you so much for having me, and I look forward to your many inquiries about evangelism resources. And there's a fantastic book available on the growth table upstairs. You can scan the QR code. It's called Evangelism Without Additives for further reading. I'm just going to end it there. Yeah.